Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and I am so excited to be celebrating 10 years of meaningful conversations with you. As we step into our new primetime hour, it's such an honor to share this exciting new chapter with you. So whether you're starting your day out, headed to work, or listening from wherever you are, this hour is designed to bring you thoughtful dialogue, fresh insight, and inspiring stories so you can make every moment count. So thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive in. We're here today with special guest, Joseph Bolton, who's here to share with us his new book series, Old Grandmother's Tree. So what if a forgotten ancestor story could reconnect you to your roots and reveal a strength you never knew you had? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Joseph Bolton was born in Rhode Island during the twilight of the golden age of French-Canadian culture, New England. His adventurous spirit led him to enlist in the U.S. Army, where he served as an airborne paratrooper before earning an appointment to the United States Military Academy at West Point, graduating in 1989. He went on to complete Ranger Training School and built an 18-year military career, concluding with a combat tour in Afghanistan as a space operations officer. So welcome to the show, Joseph Bolton.
Oh, thank you. I'm really happy to be here this morning.
Well, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this series. So what even inspired you to write this?
Well, first, my mother's family is French Canadian, and I was always fascinated with our family history there. And later on, as an adult, I researched our family history with ancestry.com. DNA tests, I gave DNA tests to my mother and her siblings, and I was able to piece together this incredible story about my family history in Canada. So not only did I learn about all these great French Canadian ancestors who go all the way back to the very first French settlers in Canada, but I also discovered four gateway Native American ancestors. And of those four, the most inspirational was an Algonquin woman named Rimete Wiawagwe, and she lived in the mid 16 to late 1600s. And her life was very well documented, and she had a very remarkable life. And she is the old grandmother of Old Grandmother's Tree. And so the books are based on her and her descendants in Quebec and their magical adventures. And I was also inspired by my love of folk tales. And these stories are actually written in the style of original folk tales with trickster animal characters, a little bit of magic, and lots of very beautiful color illustrations.
So can you share a little bit about her life?
Yes, she was born about in 1631, I believe, in Trois-Rivières in Quebec. She was an Algonquin woman, and when she was 22 years old, she was married to another Algonquin named Assababish, and between the two of them, they had two small children. And in 1652, her village, Trois-Rivières, was raided by Mohawk Native Americans from New York. And in the attack, her husband was killed, and her two small children were taken away from her. So at 22, she lost her husband and she lost her two small children, and she's barely out of her teens. 5 years later, she married a French settler named Pierre Cauque, and her and Pierre became my ancestors, and not only mine, but the ancestors of thousands of people of French Canadian descent in the United States and Canada today. And at the end of her life, the Jesuit priest in Trois-Rivières wrote of her, and he wrote this very beautiful two-line eulogy. And he said, Rimete Wiawagwe lived a full life with dignity, respect, and love, a courageous and loving Algonquin woman. So between those three events, loss of her first family, the marriage of her second husband, and at the end of this life, we have this beautiful eulogy. There has to be an incredible story in there. And so that was be kind of the kernel of the whole book series. And I wrote about how she felt after the attack, how she felt about marrying again and having a family, and then the impact of her life and her decisions on her descendants, her grandchildren, great grandchildren, and so on, all the way down to me.
What a remarkable story. And to find that nugget in your family history, that's such an amazing piece to have. So, how did you interweave this into a folk tale?
Well, first of all, I use folktale. When I say folktale, most time we think about stories that are old. In this case, these stories are original, but instead of just trying to do a historical novel or historical fiction in the traditional sense, is that I took her story, a remarkable story, and I immersed it into the language of a folktale. So that's why I incorporated elements like magic, trickster animal characters that are inspired by Native American folktales as well. And so I pick the folk tale as a language because it's very universal. Every culture has folk tales. So when you read these stories, they're going to feel familiar to you, but they're all original.
That is just so remarkable. Why did you feel it was so important to bring her story to life in these books?
Well, for one, I think that she must have had an incredible impact on the people around her. When you look back onto when she died in 1699, that world, women didn't have a lot of status. So, for a priest who has to record deaths and births and baptisms in his village that he's in charge of, for him to record something significant about the life of a woman means she had to have some kind of importance to the local village and the community. That would be really unusual if she was a European woman, but it's even more so, I think, for a woman of First Nations and Algonquin heritage for this priest to remark on her. So she had to have a big impact. And the other thing is that her legacy lives on today. As I said, she's my ancestor, but she's also the ancestor of many people in Canada and the United States who are French Canadians. So her impact of her genetic impact, if you want to call it that, is still felt today in North America. So she's actually, I think, a very important person in history, and I think she's also very inspirational. When you lose everything at 22, and we think 22 is very young today, and and it still is, but to lose everything barely out of your teens, but to work through that at the end of your life, to be lauded so highly, she had to have been a very inspirational person. So I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make her the basis of this book.
So, how did you work on uncovering just your own family history? And what were some of the things you learned about yourself and your family?
For one, growing up, we always thought we were 100% French Canadian. That's really not true. My mom's side of the family thought we was 100% French. We weren't really aware of the Native American impact in our family's history. There were rumors of it. Some members of the family thought maybe it was possible. But there were other ancestries that are also kind of filtered into my mother's side. For example, there's a little bit of Spanish. We have a Spanish soldier that settled in Quebec. We have English that were escaping the Reformation in England over to Canada. So that's very interesting also. But I think one of the things I learned about this process is just how connected I am to the history of Canada itself. I think that's one of the more remarkable things. And also, I was able to make some very good friendships with the Algonquin people in Canada, in around Pembroke, Ontario. The Algonquin community there, they really loved the book. Some of me, Mateo Wagwe's descendants actually live in Pembroke, Ontario, and I was able to meet them. And I've created this wonderful friendship with them. So it's been very enriching for me as well.
Well, you mentioned earlier just how much she went through at such a young age, and times are different then. People got married very young and had families, and with circumstances, a lot of them didn't live very long either. So she endured so much, including you mentioned the loss of her family. But how did all of that, including her resilience, inform the themes in this series?
Well, I think also one of the themes in the early on in the story was the caring of her extended family. The very first story of the very first volume begins with her grandparents talking about her, and they were remarking that it's been 5 years, and that her own grief, Mateo Uwagwe's grief, was not only affecting her, but it was affecting everyone around her. And so her grandparents intervened directly with her. Grandfather actually went to the church to pray for her and then went and found the man that he knows that she loves and also knows that he loves her, Pierre Cauc in the story, and brought them together. And so the very first theme you would see is a sense of caring of the larger community and also their importance of that extended family in the process of healing and loss. So that was probably one of the biggest themes in there of the early part of the book.
Is there a secondary theme you would think that runs through the books as well?
I think that is remember who you are. And I think also that the story of our ancestors, your ancestors, my ancestors, their story did not end when they died, that we are the continuation of their story. And the books are actually written in a way, because some stories actually take place in the future, that you as a reader, especially if you are a descendant of Mateo Uwagwe, you are actually immersing yourself in the story and being part of it while you're reading the books because you are a continuation of her story. Her story didn't end when she died. I am her story. I have her story continuing today. And even writing the books is, in a sense, in a meta sense, the continuation of her story.
Was it difficult to bring and bridge these pieces of her story together to write these books?
I think the writing part was probably not the most difficult part, at least according to my writing style. I usually see stories, they kind of come to me as a film in my mind, and I see them play over and over again until I feel like they're ready. And then I sit down, no matter what time of the day it is or night, when I'm ready, I'm ready. I sit down in front of the computer and I type it up. But one of the challenges we also had to do was research, myself and the artist team, is to research the clothing and the home styles that people of the 1600s and early 1900s would have lived in Quebec. So there was definitely a research portion of that as well.
Did you go to any of the locations where she may have lived?
I haven't yet. I have not been to Trois Rivières, and I definitely want to get up there. I certainly have visited Quebec very often in my life, and I almost go there almost once a month, actually. But I definitely want to go to Trois Rivières. And the fourth book that's not been published yet, but it's getting ready to be illustrated, the fourth upcoming book actually has a portion of the story take place in modern Trois Rivières, actually the year 2064. And one of her descendants, my grandniece actually, is visiting Trois Rivières and visiting the location where she lived and remembering her.
That is so remarkable. I love how you interweave that with the time as well. And there's that through line for your family and for those that are related to her.
Yes, and but one thing I should mention, it kind of helps tie in kind of the axis of these stories as old grandmother. In the very beginning of the book, when she marries Pierre, Pierre gives her a gray shawl. And that night, her wedding night, early in the morning, she is woken to walk out into the forest, just awake, and she encounters the spirit of her first husband, Asa Babish. And Asa Babish encourages her, says, "Hey, you can't look backwards. I am glad that you married again because I'm gone and I wouldn't want you to be alone." And as a gift, he grabbed the Northern Lights and he infused the power of the Northern Lights and the light and the colors of the Northern Lights into the shawl. So we now have this magic shawl, and that magic shawl appears in throughout the books. Certain descendants of Rimete Wagwe, whether in the early 1900s or even the 21st century, are actually wearing that very same shawl that was given as a wedding present by Pierre to her, and then was infused with that magic by the spirit of her first husband, Asa Babish. So that shawl is a symbol of the continuity between generations as well.
That is quite remarkable. And how did that collaboration with your illustrator come together in a way that she was able to really bring this forward in the artwork and really keep that emotional depth?
Well, it was a continuous collaboration. And actually, earlier I mentioned I have a team of artists. I have two artists that actually had to work on this. This book is so large and unusual in its size and its scope, this project, with 700 full color illustrations, and they're very beautiful. So the first person I had work was a storyboard artist, and her name was Masami Kiono, and she works in Manhattan. She's done storyboard work for Super Bowl commercials. And so her and I would take the story and we would go page by page and we would design a rough sketch of what an illustration should go there, with the idea that illustrations are kind of the other half of the storytelling process. So you have the text, which is complemented by the illustration. So that's the philosophy that Masami and I was we storyboard all these illustrations in. Once that portion is done, then I take the story and the storyboard to Natasha Pelly Smith, who is a Paris trained artist who lives in Toronto. And we would again go through these illustrations and we would talk about her ideas for these illustrations to bring them to life and to full color. And the process is more than just coloring in the lines of color into the rough sketches. Natasha would often bring her own depth. She has a very beautiful technique of bringing a three-dimensional look to these illustrations. And she would also have her own idea of what kind of emotions we're trying to convey in each illustration. So every illustration is meticulously designed. So imagine doing that process for 700 illustrations. It was a lot of work, tremendous amount of work. And it's very unusual that for a book to be designed this way, that it's almost a graphic novel for a book this size to have almost one illustration per page. Because we're talking about 60,000 words of text in all three of these volumes. And the reason why it's unusual is because it's so difficult to do. It's so difficult to manage a project this size working with an artist for many different reasons. But it's definitely a grueling process. And working with my artist team, I had to be also a coach, even though I'm not an artist. I would coach them, I would encourage them, I would make suggestions back and forth. So it was definitely a collaboration between all of us.
Well, it sounds like you're perfectly poised to have this book become a film or a series.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This is ready to go. As I mentioned, we have 60,000 words of text. So we have a lot of story. And I have another fourth book that's already written. It already have the rough sketches, and Natasha is going to begin the illustration process, the final illustration process shortly. So we'll have like 700 illustrations. We have all the texts, and because these are a collection of stories, which lends itself to be kind of an episodic nature. Each story can be expanded out as an episode of a TV series. What also makes this easier is that if you are a producer or you're somebody looking for a project, well, the first step's already done. Those beautiful illustrations serve as your initial storyboard process in taking these books from the page to a either an animated media or a live action film, for example. So it's all ready to go. It's almost turnkey as much as you can make it turnkey.
It sounds like you just need the right producer or agent to make this go.
Yes, and I am open to people to contact me if they'd like, and we can talk about it and see if we can work something out. But it definitely is ready to go. I think that people who have read this story and have read these books, they always come away with a very positive feeling because these stories have a positive message. They're above all else very entertaining, and they appeal to adults and to children, but especially I think I've noticed is that adults like reading these stories to their children and their grandchildren, and everyone enjoys it. So I think it has a very broad appeal. It's very entertaining, and it's got a positive message. What's not to like?
Without a doubt. I mean, it's so well put together. So we've touched on the first book, and I know you've shared a little bit about the next two. Can you share a little bit about those books without giving away any spoilers?
No, I don't mind at all, actually. So one thing with creative process, we built these stories together. Right now we have 3 volumes. So the first two, volume one and volume two, kind of go together very well because they deal with pretty much the same characters through them. The third volume is called The Dance of Creation, and it's designed as a sequel and a prequel to the first 2 volumes. And then the fourth book will be Rimateo Wiawagwe at the end of her life, just a couple of days before she died. She tells the story of the attack, how she experienced it, and how she felt about it. She tells that story to her granddaughter. And so that kind of begins the process. But one of the things that we did that's kind of unusual when we designed these books is that you can take any story in any volume, 4 volumes when they're all done, available, and you can read them in any order that you wish. It doesn't matter. The whole series is designed almost like a mosaic, where each story is a little piece of glass that you mount on the wall, and you slowly, as you read a story, you kind of piece that together on the wall, and you build this much broader mosaic picture, and a grander story will emerge. And it doesn't matter. Every story kind of stands on its own, but they're definitely tied into the other stories. So it's a very interesting design the way we set it up. You do not have to read this in any particular order. And if you finish the books, you can always go back and start in a different place and just move around. And it'll come to you in a different way, in a different flavor. But at the end, you'll still arrive at this one grand story.
So, do you feel that your French Canadian heritage and even a little bit of your background play a role in the storytelling and the cultural perspectives of the book?
Well, I think the French Canadian people in the United States and Canada have a very unique history. We're a very small population in North America. We're also a very ancient population going back into the early 1600s in North America. And our culture kind of grew up in this very, this harsher, kind of colder environment of Canada and Quebec in particular. So I think it's made us a very close knit, a very rugged kind of people. And so I think that also infuses itself into the story, and especially how family is very important in the French Canadian community. And family is very important in the stories of the book. Not only the human families, but also the trickster animal characters are themselves a family, and they have their own kind of adventures as a family and relations among themselves as a family, as brothers and sisters, parents and uncles to each other. And so that kind of reflects the French Canadian culture, I think.
Why would you say the stories are relevant, especially for today's audience?
Well, for one, I think that we kind of forget in our busy life, we forget to look back at our own roots. We get so focused on what's right in front of us. So the first theme that really pops out of it is that regardless of what your heritage is, whether it's French Canadian or something else, you need to reach back to your elders, your aunts and uncles, your great aunts and uncles, your grandparents, great grandparents, whoever's alive. And you need to reach out to them and make that cultural connection. Get the stories from them and listen to their stories and make that connection while you have them. So that'd be the first part. And the second part is that recently Canada just passed, this particular French Canadians in particular, Canada just recently passed a law that if you have a Canadian ancestor and you can document it, then you are by statutory law today a Canadian citizen, which means that I am by statutory Canadian law a Canadian citizen. What I am in the process of doing is documenting that with the birth certificates of my mother, my grandfather, and my great grandparents going back into Quebec. So I think that kind of resonates today that if you are, especially a French Canadian, and you've always yearned for this connection or felt this connection in your heart to Canada and Quebec, there's also this other opportunity that where you can actually kind of return to the homeland as a Canadian, or maybe at least a dual citizen, a US and Canadian citizen, and have that connection. And I think that's important to me personally because I always felt pulled into that other side, north side of the border. So I think having dual citizenship kind of reflects my own nature, and I think it reflects the nature of many of us French Canadians. And there is kind of a renaissance of French Canadian culture in New England. We have Poutine festivals, we have cultural festivals. I run a French Canadian festival in my hometown in Leominster, Massachusetts. So we are kind of rediscovering ourselves after kind of almost disappearing culturally. We're kind of coming back.
Do you feel that this story, these books have really helped to bring everyone together?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that when people look at this, one of the things they're definitely inspired to, especially the French Canadian, is, they'll say to me, I want to learn about my family history too. And I'll help them. I will actually help them find their own roots through ancestry.com, encourage them to take DNA tests, and I'll kind of help them along with that as well. And, the books have kind of serving as a wake up call to that connection, that we realize that our story, it just didn't begin when we were born, but our own stories ourselves as a people and as individuals goes back centuries. And so these books are helping kind of people to rediscover that.
Well, Joseph, The Old Grandmother's Tree is such a remarkable series. Where can people connect with you and be part of your community?
Well, I would encourage people to look at the Old Grandmother's Tree website, and you can find it under oldgrandmotherstree.com, written as one word, no apostrophe, oldgrandmotherstree.com. And in there, this website, you find my biography, biography of Natasha. You'll have some background information, first source information about Marie Mateo Wiawagwe and how her life was documented. And I also have a character Wikipedia. So let's say you're very curious about the books, but you're not sure you want to buy one yet. You could look at the character Wikipedia, and there's about at least 100 lines in there, I think. And it tells you about the settings of the books, individual characters. And so I think if you read through that before you order the books, you'll have fun seeing how all that comes together. So that I would encourage you to go to that website. You can also find the books on Amazon, and some of the books have been reviewed. You can read the reviews of some of the people who have also enjoyed the books. But the books are available in both French and English on Amazon, and they're available in Kindle, ebook, and soft cover, and also a hardcover edition. And you can find as a link there on the website where you can reach out and contact me, and I'd love to hear from you.
Well, Joseph, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Oh, I've enjoyed it. It's been very fast.
Oh my goodness, this time does go by so fast. Make sure to visit Joseph's website at oldgrandmotherstree.com for more information. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.